I'd like to call the meeting to order. Just for everyone at the table, these microphones are different than the ones upstairs. If you haven't noticed, in order to mute them, you have to hold it to mute it. So if you're having a conversation, it's going to be picked up at home. Okay. First item on the agenda is minutes that they're not ready, so we'll skip that. And we're going to move right into elementary school design update. And anybody that's here, if you would mind, please sign in. If you haven't, the sheet is, the committee doesn't have to. Shane takes attendance. Okay, Scott.
Thank you very much. The Wayne Matson is here with us tonight from Griffith and Berry. He sort of represents our mechanical, electrical, plumbing. He is an owner at Griffith and Berry, but he has partners that specialize in electrical and plumbing. But tonight he's presenting the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing summaries, keeping in mind that we are just in schematic design. And so in this phase of a project, we don't do any mechanical, electrical, or plumbing design. We simply take a look at the systems, propose new possibilities for replacement, renovation, et cetera. And so tonight, Wayne is here to summarize some of the reporting and recommendations that were included in the conceptual design summary, and then talk a little bit about things we have seen as we move through schematic design, which may change some of those assumptions a little bit, and just generally answer any questions related to mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So he's going to give a summary and then certainly entertain any questions related to the systems at the 3 elementary schools. So.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate being here. So we had, during the summertime, we had a couple teams go through kind of Lowell and Hosmer, looking at the HVAC systems, the plumbing, fire protection, and electrical. And as a result of that survey, we put together some schematic design recommendations, which we're leading into now. So this summary is broken down by school and then in individual trades. I'm sorry.
For the members of the audience, we're in a different room tonight, so it's a little challenging, but everything that's on the screen is in front of you in this piece of paper.
Sometimes I forget there's somebody behind me. So anyway, basically the 3 schools, they're based on their vintage. They're, for the HVAC, the classrooms are all provided with classroom unit ventilators, and they vary in age from 22 years old and 17 years old. In the case of the Cunniffe, they're 22 years old. And a unit ventilator, which is one right back here, is nothing really more than a small air handling unit in your classroom that provides the heating and ventilation for that space, and is controlled by a thermostat. So each unit vent has an outside air connection and a hot water coil for heat. What we had proposed, because the classroom component of these projects is the lion's share of the work, what we had proposed in the original schematic design narrative for the HVAC is that the unit ventilators would be reconditioned. So basically, new DDC control valves, new filters, coils would be cleaned, new damper actuators and valve actuators. So basically, you're taking that cabinet and that device that's 22 years old and bringing it up to a current standard. And then the control of that unit would be integrated into a building management system. So a lot of schools have a Johnson control system that's in place that controls the heat and cooling and the energy for the school. We would incorporate these and update those controls. So this basically kind of summarized some of the work that can be done. Now, as we know, these classrooms aren't air conditioned. So what we had suggested in that report initially was that air conditioning could be added to the classrooms at Cunniffe by overlaying a VRF system, which is a variable refrigerant flow system. And as I go through the schools, I'll come back to that type of system to kind of give you a better explanation of what that really is. After we had spent some time in the school and discussed it amongst ourselves, one of the other options that we looked at is, instead of rebuilding the unit ventilator, is just to go ahead and replace that unit ventilator with a modern version of that. It looks essentially the same, it works essentially the same, but it comes with packaged DDC controls in it. We could add demand-controlled ventilation that's CO2 based, so the outside air being brought in that's heated and cooled can be modulated based on the occupancy as you measure the CO2 of the space. The benefit to that is that you have a brand-new piece of equipment that's fully warranted, that's not 22 years old. I mean, that's 22 years old today, so by the time we get into construction, we add on to that, obviously. So that's kind of what we're looking at for the classrooms for kind of, and you'll see when I get to the Lowell slides, it's very similar for that as well. Yes,
Cost savings between option A and B per unit?
actually, the operating savings, actually, they're very close.
And so the cost, the hard cost savings and the operating costs.
Hard cost savings, we don't have, the incremental cost difference is negligible, because what you're doing is you're replacing labor for material. So a new unit ventilator, you're just paying for material, sliding into the spot. Rebuilding unit ventilator, you're paying for labor, okay? Operating costs, a rebuilt unit ventilator operates at about the same cost as a brand new one. They really do the same thing, because even the rebuilt one, we would put all new controls on that unit, make it operate like a new unit, okay?
We're really saying no cost impact between options A and B.
Very, very marginal, very, very marginal. And actually, even the new unit ventilators, we can get them with ECM motors, which are a little more efficient, so.
If that could be provided at the next time we have this discussion, because I think that's critical to the decisions that we're going to be making.
Sure. One of the things that we were planning on doing as part of the schematic design cost estimating, we were going to show the building committee that incremental cost and give you a chance to make that choice as part of the cost analysis for schematic design. So we will be doing that.
Thank you.
Again, if anybody sees anything on the slide as I'm talking, just don't hesitate to interrupt me. It's not a problem, so, yeah. So, in the kind of elementary school, the community did a great job. They replaced the existing boilers with new gas-fired, high-efficiency condensing boilers. So these things are brand new. They're 95+% efficient. So we wouldn't be removing these boilers. That was money that was well spent. And actually, the circulating pumps that are connected to these boilers had been updated with variable frequency drives for additional energy savings. So you're in good shape on this boiler room.
The distribution new?
Sorry?
The distribution new?
Distribution is not new, no. And any work we do as we modify the school, we would have to modify distribution accordingly. Then again, in the gymnasium, you see here, we have an air handling unit that's 22 years old, but even a brand-new air handling unit is basically the same as this. So one cost-saving option is just to do belts, bearings, and shivs. Shivs are just a fancy word for pulleys. Clean up the unit, put new controls on it, and have it returned to service.
Excuse me. Is there anything in an update like that we could do to make it quieter in a space? Because in the past, I know the PE teacher wore a headset and amplified her voice to talk over the sound of that unit.
Yeah, we could look at that now. There's some balancing, there's some sound attenuation things we could do.
I'm talking about when it was brand new. So,
Yeah, I would just add, keep in mind that in this particular space, we're converting that to a black box theater. So as part of that, it will get all new acoustics, and then we're constructing a new gymnasium when it comes to kind of.
right, okay.
So here, the Lowell Elementary School, I mean, it's another picture of a unit ventilator. I don't get the cool-looking pictures like the architects get. I get steel boxes. But again, it's the same principle. The Lowell for the classrooms is the same idea as for the kind of either new unit ventilators or rebuild them, overlay a VRF or air conditioning, integrate into the BMS, the same type of thing. Lowell Elementary Boiler Room, again, previous work done by Watertown. These are state-of-the-art, high-efficiency condensing boilers. I mean, these are Viessmann boilers. They're basically the Mercedes-Benz of boilers. These are great. So they're suitable for any project that's coming down the road. They have a long service life in front of them. So that was money that was well spent. Well, excuse me? These are like a year, year to two.
No, they're closer to 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
This boiler is still made to this day. I mean, this has got plenty of life ahead of it. And of course, everything we do, we're going to be updating the building management system in all the schools. So upgrading all the graphics, integrating all this equipment in so it can all be scheduled with an occupied and unoccupied schedule. have things, have adjustments made based on the occupancy of the school and things like that, so. Like Lowell Elementary School, here's their gymnasium, this is their air handling unit. I surveyed this school's gym personally, my partner did the other one. Didn't notice any acoustical issues in here, but we will always look at that as we move into a design. Last thing we need is to leave you with a problem that was already existing. Again, an overhaul, an integration into controls. So on those two schools, one of the things we talked about is overlaying a VRF system into the schools, into the classrooms. So what this represents is, just imagine that these boxes are classrooms. So the unit ventilator would still exist, and what would be in the ceiling would be this a device, this cassette, 2x2, 3x3 box that provides cooling. In years past, if you did cooling like this, every single one of these boxes would also have a condensing unit on the roof. Now these are all piped, manifolded to one condensing unit. A contractor's only pulling refrigeration piping through ceilings and tight spaces, not running large ductwork. So it's a great way of adding air conditioning to a space that wasn't originally designed to be air conditioned. There's a couple of reasons. One is the operating cost on VRF has shown itself to be better. Now the one cool thing about VRF is you can have one condensing unit. You can mix and match the devices that are in the room. So you could have a ceiling cassette, you could have a concealed fan coil, you could have a low wall console, or you can actually, now they're coming out with, you can actually even have a classroom unit ventilator, new one, integrated into the VRF. So we're just kind of, this is like the first blush at a recommendation for adding air conditioning to the classroom. And this kind of chart kind of answers one of your questions, like all these different components can be mixed and matched in a VRF system. So it gives you, if you have acoustical concerns, you can go with concealed fan coil with ductwork and sound attenuators, or if you just want to have a exposed cassette. And this shows how you can zone different things. So you have great temperature control, one per classroom, one per open office space. Hosmer is a little different animal because most of the classrooms are going to be all the elementary school will be new classrooms. So the only classroom ventilators that will be left will be those that would be in, I think, what the pre-K, preschool area. So in this case, the options are for the units that are left behind would be the reconditioning the units, integration of the BMS, cleaning new belts and motors. In the new classrooms, I mean, in the existing classrooms, we could also replace them as an option. So in the existing area, it's kind of the same thing, kind of a low look. Hosmer would be the same. Like the Hosmer boilers, these guys are, they're outdated. They're coming up at the end of their service life. These are cast iron boilers, brand new. They were only like 78 to 80% efficient when they're brand new. Now the efficiency based on the age is down in the 60s and 70s. So these boilers, we recommend having them replaced. They're 22 years old. They're already 75% through their life. So any project, this is something that should be considered. However, the way the Hosmer plan is shaking out, we'll have a new boiler room in the new section of Hosmer, and we'd be piping back to the existing school anyway. So one of the options for HVAC in the new classrooms is we've been doing a lot of chilled beam projects. And so basically a chilled beam is a device in the ceiling. The ventilation air is ducted into it, and through the means of induction, they induce room air to cool or heat that room. It's just, we've applied it in a lot of schools in Plymouth. It's been applied at Natick and some of the Boston public schools. So that's an option of what the HVAC in a new classroom will look like. So it's very unobtrusive, very quiet, no moving parts in the classroom. It meets all the lead requirements.
Caveat, sorry guys, with chilled beam is condensation. So anytime I've ever used chilled beam, we've had major condensation issues where it's essentially raining inside. So especially with the temperature fluctuations we have in some of these classrooms and the humidity, I would really strongly be concerned about
So there's we designed the chill beams to do sensible cooling only. So on your rooftop unit, you remove the moisture of the air out of the rooftop unit, so the air that's going down to the unit is dry. It's 46 grains per pound. So you won't get the condensation issue, and then the chill beam in the classroom only does the sensible cooling. So latent removes moisture, sensible just changes the temperature, so you don't have the issue with the condensation getting into the classrooms. Now, say a teacher opens a window. We have dew point approach sensors on the units, so you can see by the chilled, I don't mean to get very technical, I don't want to put everybody to sleep, because Scott will be mad at me, but through controls, you can see when you're gonna start getting condensation. And if the window's open and you're starting to approach a point where you're getting condensation, the controls turn off the chilled water valve to that device, and it won't rain in the classroom. So, and these devices require a little bit of a cultural shift. I mean, teachers, they want to open windows even if the air conditioning's on, but we have, the schools that we have these in, everybody's gotten used to them, and we've had no issues with them. So, and they've been applied in one community in 100% of their schools now, and it's been successful. But I do understand your concern. I am aware of that. On the electrical recommendations, again, I broke this down by schools. There'll be a new building electric service. For example, on the Cunniff, the existing switchgear is 800 amps. It's not enough capacity to support a modern school with the technology that goes into a modern school, with the air conditioning that goes into the modern school. So our office has proposed a new 1600 amp, 27740 volt switchboard. We would then backfeed that back to the 800 amps. So the 800 amp stays in place. We just backfeed it with a 1600 amp. So you get a brand new electric service brought in. New, 4-inch conduits brought to the school, so that covers cable TV and phone. There's a new addressable manual and automatic fire alarm system. The one that's there now can't be upgraded to that level. And then, of course, all the lighting in new and renovation will all be LED lighting with light control, dimmable, daylight harvesting, everything that you see in any other lead school that's being built. And that'd be true in the new as well as the renovated areas. And then lastly, the bidirectional coaxial antenna, that's a fire department and police department requirement. It allows communication in the school between, on the VHF radios that firefighters and policemen use. It's kind of a fancy term, but that's all it is. Lowell School, it's exactly the same. Again, except instead of a 1600 amp service, we'll be bringing in a 2000 amp service for Lowell, just because it's bigger. We'll be backfeeding the existing 800 amp panel. The switchgear that's in these schools is the 800 amp services are there. It's in good shape, and it can be serviced and maintained. So instead of just tearing everything out, we can put a new panel and backfeed what's being renovated. Hosmer School, again, this is a little bit bigger, a little different animal here. So this one here, instead of, they have, it's an existing 1,000 amp service. Now we'll be going to a new 4,000 amp service. And then refading from the new service. Again, new addressable fire alarm system. That auditorium would have new lighting, dimming racks, LED throughout again in existing and renovated areas. And again, the bidirectional coaxial amplifier.
Is there any plans for, excuse me, emergency backup generators in any of these projects?
We do consider it an all project, and what we do is myself and my partner will come back to the community, find out, because by code you don't need it. As long as you have life safety, you have battery packs so you can exit the school, you have auto recall in the elevator, it can be done through a battery pack. But again, it's a community issue. If it's in the budget, most of our schools, I think right now, Scott, what do we have, 90% of our schools have emergency generators on them? And then the size of the generator would be predicated on your needs. Is the kitchen refrigeration equipment, the boilers would at least be on it, the pumps would at least be on it to keep the school above freezing. So that's a conversation that our office will have with you through Scott as we move from schematic design into design development. So
I'm not sure if the buildings are designated as shelters through the town. I know that the high school was, but just the high school? Okay.
It is something we certainly want to talk about. Typically, It's more rare to do an elementary school because if a community uses one of their school buildings for a shelter, it tends to be the middle school or the high school. And certainly there's an incremental cost and then a continuing maintenance cost associated with placing emergency generators at those locations. As I recall, the conceptual design budgets do not include an emergency generator at all of those, but we can certainly put it on an incremental list for consideration when we get to the end of schematic design and look at the cost estimates for schematic design.
And on to the plumbing recommendations for the school. A lot of the plumbing work is gonna be, decided upon by the fixture count, fixture locations, ADA requirements. So, the original plan is that any of the 1996 plumbing fixtures that were installed during that renovation, they would remain in place unless those spaces were being renovated and changed, in which case then those fixtures would then be brought up. So if a toilet room wasn't being touched as part of the project, we'd be leaving those fixtures in place. And then of course, any additions, storm drainage will be brought out to the site. It's, basically this work is all decided by how the project goes as far as fixture count, toilet room locations, ADA requirements, like I said, so.
Condition of the existing toilets. I would be surprised that we wouldn't replace those.
They're not great, but they're in decent shape,
Yeah.
but I don't know how much longer they're gonna last either. Some of the, like, the sinks are old, just.
Thinking of the
just
upgrades with like low flow, and you have a couple of options now, so. Okay.
And that's, those type of things are, that's, like that low hanging fruit, we would consider that. So if we started to see, fixtures that are like in deplorable condition and say, you know what, we really recommend replacing these, or we see that the use of those fixtures is so high that going to low flow makes sense, that'll be built into the
Could be
project.
an economy of scale if we replace them all, and it could
Absolutely.
always
Yep, absolutely.
I would just also add that the fixture cost is a fairly low cost, so we may decide to go through in some of the existing toilets to remain and go ahead and just replace the fixtures. But the distribution, for example, at the Lowell and the Cuniff was completely replaced in '96. So the plumbing distribution is in good shape, and we're trying to avoid doing any demolition in those toilet areas where it's in good shape, but fixture replacement is easy in those areas. That's right, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and as we move it through into the project, if we get to that point, we'll do a one-by-one review of all the fixtures and put together a list, I mean, these surveys that we had done this summer were really to kind of ascertain the general condition and to kind of get a handle on how the systems are tied together and what condition they're in and how they work and that type of thing, so. Hot water heater in the school, we propose as part of this project, and any project that it be replaced with a high efficiency condensing, hot water heater. Get away from the storage, the large storage tank, atmospheric burner type. And then we'll keep a pump will recirculate water through the hot water system, which is traditional. And we keep that in place. Have a little bit of control over it. Carefully select the recirc pump to avoid wasted energy. And then the natural gas meter and service will be upgraded if required due to the new gas loads. The Lowell Elementary School, very similar. Fixtures replaced where required or relocated. The hot water heater again will be replaced. We have gas service upgrade as well. And then in the Hosmer, that's a newer renovation, so 2002 stuff is in probably better condition in most places. But again, most of our work is all gonna end up being the new building, and the renovation portion of Hosmer will look like the other projects. Again, new hot water heaters, all high efficiency. Everything we put, every new fixture will be low flow, meet current code, and be leak compliant. Fire protection is pretty straightforward. It's all code driven. 1996 stuff In the Conneff, sprinkler heads will be modified, readjusted to suit new spacing, new distribution piping will be run where you need to get better coverage. And then we'll extend into any of the new zones. Same thing again with Lowell. In Hosmer, there's a lot more new construction, that'll be all new sprinkler systems. So everything on the fire protection system will be brought up to the current FDA regardless of what we do. I know I flew through that really quickly. I can take any questions that come up or any concerns.
Questions from the committee, Paul?
Back to the chill beam, you said you've used it in some communities with success. Can we get a list or some names of some of those communities? That'd be great.
For all the AI3 projects, it's really easy, so it's.
I would also say that we often do a little bit of comparison, and I think it's worthy here when we get to the end of schematic design. For example, at the Hosmer, where it's all new systems, we will go through an explanation of chill beam versus variable air volume, which is sometimes done because we have had districts that were a little nervous about the chill beam system because there were some really poor designs out there when that kind of started 10 or 12-ish years ago. And so a lot of districts were just gun shy and didn't want it. So in those instances, we have done VAV systems, and we can certainly talk about the differences in those two systems, both in their functionality and in their cost, when we get to the end of schematic design and start to price the system.
Yeah, I kind of put it on there just to kind of give the committee kind of an idea of the different systems that we were thinking and the directions that we might want to have gone. So.
I think that, just to reiterate, what's going to be helpful for us moving forward is just seeing multiple options and the operating cost and hard costs for install, just so we can see it all laid out in front of us, and especially for you to take it back to your team as well, because you're going to be operating the buildings. So.
Yeah, we listen to the facilities a lot as well. We don't want to force any design upon somebody. I mean, every community is different. Some communities, based on their maintenance staff, their technical expertise, and their past experience, we look at that because that'll also help decide what type of system you have. You don't want things to be so cumbersome and complex that nobody can operate it. But at the same time, we want to recognize energy efficiency and keep operating costs low as well. So we work with the committee and facilities on that.
And that was one of the things I just wanted to add is, having these controlled systems, Johnson Controls, the Metasys systems are great. This is the way that we need to go. But when they don't work, you need somebody that can operate that. And right now, I do not have that. We have Johnson Controls in a lot of the buildings. They are down. We cannot figure it out. And it is a large chunk of operating costs to bring somebody in to fix that. I'm working on doing that, but we bring all these systems up. That is going to be a big chunk of operating costs, at least initially, to get somebody to do that. But it's the right answer. I'm not saying it, but I'm just letting the.
That was my next question.
At a time, let her
Sorry,
finish.
the building automation system, I think, so do you have Johnson in every single building right now?
We do not, but Johnson Control is the only one that we have in the buildings. So.
All right, because that's one thing that we could do when we're bidding out the project is, go to Siemens, go to Johnson's, go to Schneider, and we can look at that and bid that to make it more competitive, because it's a little bit of a monopoly when you start getting into the automation system, but it's great for controls aspect of it when it comes to maintaining the building.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing, is if, depending on what we have in the building, yeah.
You haven't gone so far down the road with Johnson right now that would preclude anybody else. I mean, it's,
Not in these schools.
Exactly. I mean, and everything we're going to be doing is going to be full native BACnet, so it's an open protocol. If you have Johnson Metasys like you have in some schools, Johnson Metasys is a Johnson factory supported product only, so you don't get the independent control guys like some of the other Johnson products, like the AX, and FX and things like that. So.
The other thing I just want to clarify is Lori inherited a real mixed bag of different kinds of controls as well. And so part of the challenge in the district now is getting consistency through all the buildings, which this project would do, and then having somebody to monitor those systems. So.
Yeah, because right now you have a mix of pneumatic and electric, pneumatic, new compressors, old compressors, new DDC panels, older DDC. So yeah, as one of the key focuses of this project, like Scott said, is just to bring that all to one common platform, make it consistent and reliable and understandable.
And we can go proprietary with a list of items and a vote of the council. So, to make things consistent.
And then did we take that into consideration when it comes to controls when we were looking at our cost reports and our original estimates?
Yes, the original estimates did include completely replacing controls all across the system, yeah.
But not proprietary. That's right.
Questions from the committee on this section? I open it up now to the, Laurie, sorry.
One last thing, and I know it was brought up at the beginning, but with our HVACs and our boilers, that distribution system does definitely need to be looked at, because I know our boilers are new, our systems are okay, but what's behind the walls is not. So as long as that's looked at.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the things we had learned when we had done the walkthrough with your staff and yourself, Lori. That we're looking at piping that's original to the school. Even though you have newer boilers, the backbone is still, and that we'd be looking at that carefully.
Anyone from the public wish to have a question, comment on this section? Anthony, please come up to the microphone and identify yourself we now have live cameras here.
Anthony Donato. I just had a quick question, and I don't know if this was addressed before, and I apologize if it was. I just didn't know with Bosch moving into town, if there was any avenue for the town to try to seek out and see if there's some sort of a partnership that might make sense for both of us. Good publicity for them, especially with regard to this HVAC aspect.
That we could look at.
Yeah, I've been looking into that and discussed it a little bit with Scott, and so great minds think alike.
They make a really good product, they would just purchase
Yeah, so Bosch was originally Baderis, and so the big German company Bosch absorbed Baderis completely, and they're before coming here, they were up in New Hampshire. Overseas in Europe, if you're in Germany, 75% of the residential and commercial market in Germany is controlled by Bosch. But they make a great product, and it's one of actually the 3 specified boilers we have on our specification. So we would have been specifying them as part of this project in any case, just because we stand by we like the product. So.
Anyone else from the public?
Hi, Lisa Feltner. I live on Parker Street and I'm a town councilor. I would just say I'm excited about the potential of the new systems and that you also gain that floor space too versus having all those individual regulators. So it's just a point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Anyone else? Scott? Thank you for your presentation. We're going to go into updated design since our last meeting, and
Sure, we'll move right along. Hopefully we'll move. Leave it to Wayne. Look at this. He was really jealous of our design presentation. I had no idea he would stoop to this level.
Nobody better than that, Scott.
I think our presentation just got really bored, but it's still available. Okay. Why is it?
went the wrong way.
Pass through it all, but it won't let me go back the other direction, sorry. there we go. Sorry about that. First, we're just going to talk about a handful of topics that came up the last time we were presenting an update on the law, and then some new developments. You may recall there was a lot of discussion around the parking on the law site and where the appropriate location was, what the appropriate count was. The building committee asked us to take a look at the possibility of doing perpendicular parking along George Street and then possibly extending that up George Street beyond Lowell Ave. So we've got a couple of diagrams here, and it's just a black and white diagram for purposes of letting you clearly see the topography. And we can, in fact, do perpendicular parking along the lower section of George Street in this area. And we've noted the key trees along George Street to make sure that you can see the parking is interrupted in the area of a tree there. And then other than that, we're able to keep up with the grade along George Street and locate approximately 23 spaces there if we took the area that you see outlined. Keeping in mind that this is just an engineering diagram, we would certainly introduce sidewalks and all the other elements to blend those in and make sure that circulation could occur around them. But this is just a black and white engineering diagram to show you that what 23 spaces would look like on the lower section of George Street, and then what 13 spaces would look like on the upper section of George Street. Again, pausing the spaces where there is a significantly sized tree to make sure that we don't disrupt those as part of introducing the perpendicular parking. And you can see the total count there is at 36 spaces, which is approximately the amount we were trying to get into the lots that you saw previously that came into the site further. Oh, I did want to point out, the reason it doesn't come further this way is because the topography is coming down fairly steep in that corner. And then just testing a small parking lot at the upper end of George Street to show what the size of that would be if, in fact, the basketball court that exists there now was moved. You can see the light outline of the basketball court underneath. And then if that court was moved 26 feet, it would allow a small parking lot to be inserted there with 16 spaces for a total of that same total of 36. Now, you can obviously see that you could also introduce a little bit of perpendicular parking in addition to this, so that number could go up a little. But that gives you a sense of the size and magnitude of perpendicular parking. And then there's some imagery to just help graphically. This is showing it with the sidewalks and blended in and connected, but I want to show the images because this just helps to show. When we were showing the two parking areas that came, this is the prior building committee meeting, when we were showing the two parking areas that came out onto the hill, they appeared to take up that space, just to give you a sense of scale and how they may or may not block the building. And then these perpendicular parking spaces clearly are in more close proximity to George Street and don't come across that view corridor as much, just to give you a sense of that.
Just
Quick
on,
question. Scott, how many spaces are we losing? Looks like about 15 or so in that one lot.
It's about that 36. We've always said that when you take a look at the spaces that maybe are or are not marked in the back combined with that one lot, we need to be at 36 to just sort of stay neutral. Yeah. Tom?
Option 2, when you had the parking lot up at the top end and moved the basketball court, you need a retaining wall at the end of the parking lot to kind of separate that.
No, we think we can pick up the grading there. In fact, we went as far as we could with that parking lot without introducing a retaining wall. And you can see the reason we're staying out of that area is right after that, as you note, it gets even steeper and starts to go away. But we think that we can tie these grades back in without disturbing the trees. Clearly, you would lose the tree that's here, but we think we can tie those grades back in. Might have to do a really small retaining wall, maybe in the corner, but nothing significant to achieve that. Now, if you tried to bring it all the way across, just as you're pointing out, you'd have to introduce a significant retaining wall and completely change that area. And so that's the reason we stopped it short in that location.
Does that not then add the cost of redoing a basketball?
It does, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. We gain a little, but it changes any potential two-way dynamic, two-way traffic dynamic there. It would have to go one way full time after that if we did angled parking. We could take a look at what the gains are, but it would require to go one way on all of those sections then if it did go to angled parking. We've made some revisions that may seem subtle, but they're important in developing the site plan, and they involve the service area in the back of the building, and then a part-time service area and access in this area of the building. And we want to show what those look like at a slightly larger scale. So on the corner of the building that exists now, not on a regular basis, but maybe twice a month, Stacy would know better than we would, but there are times when, right now, a truck comes up, drops off in this area of the existing building, and the path that goes around the building is utilized to get those deliveries in at the very lowest level for storage. And so we want to make sure that even when this addition occurs, that we keep that opportunity available and make any improvements that we might be able to as well. So we're suggesting that there be a somewhat hidden by landscaping and not necessarily obvious path, but a path that could be maneuvered by a truck that occurs right here on the corner of the building, separating with some bollard or some other technique the ability of a vehicle to get into the building or to bump into the building, but making sure that there's an opportunity there to back up and drop off goods so that there's still a path around the building and up to that lowest level storage area. There's a series of storage rooms right inside the building there. And so we're just showing that we're conscious of that path. In an ideal world, we would probably make this brick pavers or something that blends in or that's fairly attractive and try to keep it from looking like a service drop-off, but make sure that it could be utilized for that when it was necessary. There are the storage areas that get serviced by that. Boiler rooms down on that level, custodial storage, a general storage area, and so we want to maintain that access through the double doors on that lowest level with a path going around the building. And then also the more active service, certainly food delivery portion of the building is at the rear. And so we've made a handful of adjustments both to the building floor plan and to the site plan to make sure that even in this early schematic design phase that we're conscious of the fact that delivery vehicles will need to come into that drive. There'll need to be a dumpster area. The building will need to be able to receive those goods coming into the building. In the case of the kitchen, food service deliveries on a daily basis. So we've also, the adjustments are subtle, but in the back of the building, we've also adjusted the floor plan layout so that there's a trash and recycling entry and exit and separate space coming off of the dining area, that there's a service corridor that allows for the access, that allows for access of those deliveries to come directly into the dining area and then subsequently into the kitchen. It also acts as an emergency egress path out of the gymnasium when we add the new multipurpose space to that. So it's helping to clean up the addition at the rear of the building. And then we would propose likely that some kind of fence or separation be established to block that service area from the cafeteria expansion, the dining area expansion, which is right here, and do some planting around that and do some more shielding of that. But we've kind of cleaned that up a little bit to make it more serviceable.
I was just gonna suggest the opposite. If we could have a path that goes further down to at least the stairways, then from a maintenance standpoint, we could use that access too, if we can get to a stairways and go down to the boiler room. Cause right now you have us, parking where the last slide was, going into the path and around to the other side of the building. So this would be the only other way that we could get to the boiler room. So if there was just it could be a gate that we can enter and a path through there might help out.
It's a good point because Alex had a chance to chat with both Wayne and Stacy, and they're, just as you're pointing out, just to clarify for everybody else who wouldn't be familiar, there are times when things come all the way around and go down the stairs into the boiler room in this area. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah. Yes. And so we would want to make sure that there's still that opportunity to stop there and come down that path and come up to that area. It doesn't happen as often, but there are times.
The boiler room is not there though. The boiler room is,
This is the vent, like the vents on the boiler room are on this wall right here at the very bottom. So if you,
to access the
go
boiler
in there,
room.
if you take the grate off of that area, you can go right
And add
down.
a slide for us to slide.
You can go, well, that's why I say, on a few occasions, they have apparently come up that ramp, taken the grates off on that, and then placed equipment down in that area to go directly in those exit doors from the boiler room that exists there. I take it, though, that's not what you're referring to, Lori, so I don't want to hijack your
And
question.
I'm looking at two things. I'm looking at adding equipment, but our guys just getting in and out on a daily basis. We're going in and out of that boiler room a couple times a day to every building. So if we have to park at the other side of the building, walk all the way through the building, go down the stairs and around, we're wasting a lot of time in doing that.
So the best solution to resolve that is to make sure that they have parking or access available on this side or on the other side.
On some side. I mean, right now, we go through the cafeteria. So you have the maintenance guys trucking through the cafeteria in the middle of, lunch, going all the way down the hallway, down the stairs, all the way to the boiler room. It's a long trek and probably not the right way of getting to the boiler room for service.
Is the boiler room equipment entrance that you're showing on the plan?
If you were on the low, let's see. It's right here too. This is, why does it keep jumping? If it's right here. So if you came around the building, there are right now some grates above this area because this is clearly down from the entrance level.
Those double doors are not on grade.
They're not on grade, that's right, yeah. And so the addition that occurred here somewhat landlocked the boiler room. Not that it was ever easy to access, but before this addition occurred, you could come up to here, and they built the grade up to get up to this entrance when they made this the new entrance. The grade didn't always step up there and make that subterranean like it is now. So when they built Lowell, the street up, and made this a main entry to the building, that's when they dropped this down and put the grate in there. So now it's just very challenging to get to, and there's not a lot we could do with that. I mean, we can certainly work on parking and location and access, but there's not a lot we can do to return that to kind of an on-grade or a closer to grade entry on that side as a result of this now being the primary entry to the building.
Just a question back on the I guess maybe the previous one or the next one where you had yeah, no, the other one. That one. So kind of historical question, I suppose. It just seems odd to me. The kitchen is an interior space. Why would, was it always been that way? I mean, it just seems odd that they would build a kitchen in the middle.
That was all addition.
That was an addition, the whole addition.
Well, all of this was an addition.
Dining space is an addition?
The dining space is not an addition, but this gymnasium wasn't here, so you could come right up to the back side of this. Yeah.
Just want to remind you that the multi-purpose room is also going to be most likely where on election days, the voting will take place. So I think I see two doors there, so an in and out would be helpful.
Yes, yeah, right now we've got it so that you could come in and access it this way, or we've got direct door access located here and here. Yeah. But we do need to think about that because in terms of where they would be coming from in the most convenient location for those doors. It might be better if it was on this face. We'll take a look at that, but that's good to know. You know, on the, and certainly we'll be going out to the community in the very near future to talk about this, now that things have, the floor plans and site plans have settled down a little bit, and to get some input. But with regard to the site plan, is there a preference with regard to the parking and the organization based on those two schemes? Does anybody want to offer up their preference as we move forward and are continuing to develop the site plan for the law?
I would, from where I sit, I have some concerns about moving a basketball court, taking away more green space. That's just how I feel about that area.
And it's only 3 more spaces. So the cost of 3 more spaces versus moving the basketball court. I already made a note to find out when the last time we did that basketball court over. That would be part of the decision too.
Yeah, we in general, and we're showing this because we said we would test a parking lot up here, but the engineers didn't like this version. We didn't like this version. It doesn't seem logical for the 16 spots. It does seem like the perpendicular parking along George Street, as long as there's no opposition to it, makes a lot of sense. And keep in mind that we can still combine that with a smaller lot down in this area if we get into a parking crunch on the site and want to consider that as well, so.
I like the view that you were showing of the perpendicular parking on George Street much better than the other one. I mean, George Street is already operating one way for school anyways, and so in terms of people pulling in and out of that, it's already a one-way street for drop-off and pickup times. And also, I do really like the consistency that when you go further up George Street, if it's also perpendicular, that seems like it's just a little bit more user-friendly for people coming in and out of the school area because it's the same type of parking. I don't know, like that looks a lot less intrusive than the other option, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I would also prefer I like this perpendicular parking. I think it minimizes the amount of grass that's turned over to parking because you're basically using the roadway for the turning. So and visually, and if you think about on Lowell Avenue, the perpendicular parking there along the fields, it kind of is the same way and feels doesn't make it feel like a parking lot. So I think this I would definitely prefer that versus a traditional parking lot.
Would we lose spaces if we angled those spots? Because as much as we say it's a one-way, I live on Carroll Street, which is supposed to be a one-way during school, and it's not. So if the spots were angled, people would have to pull in coming one way, and they would back out and continue with the one-way direction.
Yes, if they're angled, the only way you can make angled parking and even meet the zoning regulations would be if that's one way. So,
Permanent one-way?
right, because it just violates basic traffic procedures to have somebody backing out at an angle, knowing that traffic could be coming the other way as well.
I think we can do a better job with signage on these streets after we start doing this project. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that, we can do a better job, I think, with signage and enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the best of all worlds, we would, we would end up being able to stay essentially close to parking neutral on this site. If it turns out there's a giant demand for additional parking as we move forward, then clearly something's got to give. But I think in the best of all worlds, if we could replicate the parking that we're displacing on George Street, and then on the upper section of George Street, very minimal impact to anything that's there now. So
But the question I would then have is, we're adding students, which means we're adding teachers. So parking neutral isn't gonna help.
So what was the count when we had the lot at the bottom?
it was the same. It was just under 40 spaces. It may have been 38 instead of 36.
Wondering if we can do a net add if we were to add that lower lot, because obviously with the existing topography, it makes more sense to put a lot down there versus by the basketball court because of the grade changes. So I'm wondering if there was a scheme where we could see if we were to put that lot back.
Oh,
and
you definitely,
expand it, which I know goes
definitely be a net
cuts
add.
into green space, but just, to your point, I think that parking is a concern around the school, and it might be a way to get an ad out of it.
It would definitely be a net add, and then we would just need to explore whether we do it on the lower section or we push it up to try to get it out of the view corridor a little bit more. But you could definitely add spaces by combining the perpendicular along with one, singular lot, no
Might be
doubt
worth
about it.
just studying that just to see
Yeah.
how many spaces we're actually talking about.
Yeah, okay. We've made a few adjustments to the law. We don't have to get, most of them are ones I've already talked about, but we do want to talk about the dining and the expansion of the dining area, because there is an addition of students proposed at the law, expansion of population move, I should say, to the law. So you can see the dining area is increased by the amount that's shown in the floor plan. And so we do have, as part of the presentation, just a couple of images that give you a sense of that additional space, where this would be the old exterior wall and the current dining area, existing dining area to your right. And we'd propose opening those areas where the Palladium windows exist now all the way to the ground. And then this is clearly that expansion of the dining area. In a lot of our visioning and discussions about improving the dining area, one of the things that came up was this idea of zoning it a little bit so that you could sort of subdivide the students. This presents a great opportunity to do that. And clearly we'll be doing more design work on it as we move into design development and move beyond schematic design. But that gives you a sense of the amount of volume that gets added and the way that space could be subdivided and work. And then I think there's another image. This is in the existing dining room looking out towards that addition and the additional area. And the reason we would want to screen that area we talked about earlier about screening the dumpster area and the receiving area is clearly as we move this space further out into that zone, we want to do something to sort of screen the perimeter view here from that area. So that's the reason we'd be doing that on the site plan. Or proposing that on the site
Just
plan.
real quick, you need to retain that wall, or you're choosing to retain the wall?
We need to retain it because it's load bearing structurally. And then we're choosing to leave it as brick as more of an aesthetic choice. Any questions related to anything else on the law? Okay.
Anybody from the public on the Lowell School? Step up and tell us your name just because we're on TV now.
Libby Shaw. I live in Templeton Parkway, and I'm a member of Trees for Watertown. And I really appreciate the fact, Scott, that it looks like a lot of effort is being made to retain mature shade trees in all of these designs. That's really commendable. It sounds like we don't have to argue about the value of doing that. However, especially in the design of these parking spaces, I just want to emphasize that if you want those trees, which have grown big and beautiful and healthy because they've had all that root area to spread out in, if you want those trees to continue to do well, you have to be really scientific, really conservative when you're preparing those trees for the substantial loss of root zone that's going to be required. And there's also going to be a lot of compaction. Ideally, you're going to be putting structural soil under the pavement so that those trees, once you've installed those parking spaces, the roots can then extend under there without disturbing the pavement. Roots, if you're going to be root trimming, root pruning in preparation for this kind of very substantial root loss, there are certain times of year that needs to be done. So hopefully there's going to be somebody who's probably our tree warden, but hopefully somebody representing this project who's who's very familiar with how you make sure that trees in this kind of situation can survive and thrive long-term with this kind of substantial modification of the root system.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Very well said, and more educated on trees than certainly I am. But our landscape architect will have an arborist on board to prepare the specifications where we disturb an area like that. So certainly it would be our goal to do everything we can to protect those as part of the proposed construction and development. Okay. Just a couple of quick items related to the CUNF, because we do continue to develop it. I think the primary thing that we want to point out, there are a lot of minor adjustments. I think the primary thing we want to point out with the CUNF is that we have made some modifications to the zone that exists between the new gymnasium and the previous gymnasium, which gets converted to a music room / black box theater. And it involves providing a vestibule and a receiving area in this location, because currently it's a real struggle. The receiving sort of comes in through the kitchen area and then currently has to be staged on the, no pun intended, on the stage area because there's nowhere else to place it. So our proposal with the improved layout is to be able to bring those things in, have an area to keep them before they're distributed into the building, and stage them before they're distributed into the building, that also has double doors and then a second set of double doors, and then make sure that we've got an area that's zoned for no parking so that there's clear access to the kitchen, that we maintain the basement access to the boiler room area, and that we present an opportunity for maintenance parking and other facilities-related parking in this same zone as part of our proposed modifications to this area. So subtle adjustments, but we're just trying to be conscious of the fact, I think Lori has brought it up a couple times, be conscious of the fact that we need to do everything we can to improve the service access and the parking availability for maintenance and facility personnel in that area. So. And on the, any guys, I know that was minor, but any questions related to the CUNF? Okay.
Wasn't one of the issues, Lori, access to the elevator? Was it just the direct access to the basement?
Yeah, it was, but as long as the stairs going down the boiler room is still there, then that will suffice for most of what we need, and then walk through the elevator.
Yep.
Anyone from the public have any comments on the Cuniff? Okay, Scott.
On the Hosmer site, as a reminder, and this is the exact slide from the last building committee meeting where we talked about the parking that would potentially be displaced as part of proposed development on the site. And the count, which Tom pointed out was incorrect last time. I don't remember if it was this slide or the next slide, but is now corrected. And so this is also the slide from last time where, as you may recall, we were proposing to expand the parking that currently exists in this zone and really expand the parking in this zone too, although there's only minor parking that exists there now, so it's a pretty substantial expansion in order to replicate all of the spaces that were being displaced. And there was some discussion about the loss of the play court that exists in this zone, and that when parents have children who are playing on the fields, involved in activities on the fields, and have certain age levels that could be on the playground, they also have age levels that might potentially be utilizing the court there. And if we could bring that court or a portion of it back to this zone, that it would be deemed beneficial. So after some adjustments to the site plan, we do have room to get the full-size basketball court as a hard surface play area adjacent to a playground that would sort of wrap around that area and still keep the field size that we had proposed, and really take the parking out of this area, which improves all of this in some regards in terms of making it contiguous kind of play and recreation area. It does require us to expand the size of the parking lot in this area clearly to make up for those spaces, but we do so in what was the previous building footprint, and we do so by taking one of the basketball court that was over here previously and leaving one hard surface court area along with the playground we had in that area previously. And so we've adjusted the site plan to kind of reflect that change, which we think is a positive change. The consolidation of the parking makes it somewhat more efficient too, and it gets a significant amount of parking very close to what will be the entry to the building and then the entry to the preschool classrooms.
What's the status of the lot adjacent the varsity softball field? To the right of it?
It's neutral.
Neutral.
They're not gonna change anything with that.
Could we capture that?
It already is parking. So,
Just wondering if we could pave it and stripe it.
Portion of it is paved. It's been a long time since it's
Yeah,
been
it just
repaved.
looks a little rough. I'm wondering if we're upgrading all of this.
And I don't want to talk out of turn a little bit, but if we don't do it in this project, I think you'll be seeing it in the town's 5-year capital improvement program.
John and then Stacy.
But just related to that, I mean, so we've had some conversations in the past about whether some of that can be captured, if you will, for the Hosmer, but maybe some of it is now. I'm not exactly sure whether people that use the Hosmer, do they park there? Do any teachers park there? I don't think so, but I don't know.
It just in our experience, it appears that from approximately this point, and the locals would know much better than we, but just based on our observations, it appears from about this point up that it's primarily Brigham House use, and from this point down, it's not used that much at all?
Where you're
Oh,
pointing to
sorry.
is off the screen.
That's not helping you. Nah.
I think with the school being moved closer to it, it'd be more likely to have teachers using it.
What I was pointing at that you can't see is, from about this zone up seems to be Brigham House parking, and from here down seems to be seldom used, except when it's used as displacement parking for the neighbors. And that's the lot that seems to be in the worst shape, is the piece that's right down here.
Kind of the unpaved part, I think.
Yeah.
But it just, again, it seems to me that, I mean, that may work, but it's a pretty good sized parking lot that's being put in there. And I guess I would, want to at least think about or explore the option of maybe that parking lot being a little smaller if we can actually incorporate parking on near the varsity softball field and then all the way down.
But John, you're not adding spaces because you're not counting the spaces that are already there into the original count that was done earlier.
Well, I guess so. I guess the question would be how those spaces are used. I mean, I know in the wintertime,
The neighbors use it quite a
they're
lot.
prime space in the wintertime because that's where they go. But other than the winter, what happens there? It's not that many people using it for Brigham House, I don't think. And so it's just kind of an area that I think we ought to have a better understanding of. Because
Right. I think that's a, I mean, I think that's an important question, and to find out, utilization-wise, is it all teachers that are parking, and how many teachers are actually parking there? And if you do the comparison, you got 36 spots at the Lowell, and then 87 spots at the Hosmer, and I'm not sure there's almost 2/3 as many teachers at the Hosmer when we're really equalizing. So
we're gonna be cutting back, right?
right. So
Right.
I think it's an awful lot of parking, and I'd like to know from the staff how many people are actually utilizing the parking.
Yeah.
Stacy, you had a question, I'm sorry.
No, no, no.
We got off track.
I just didn't know when the parking goes in because Lowell will be there it'll be a while before that parking lot can be developed because we're gonna be using the Z-shaped building for some time.
That's correct.
Minnie,
So then that lot along the western lot of Boylston Street will probably become the parking space for the swing space for all the teachers that are extra teachers that are gonna be there, because we're gonna have 2 schools worth of teachers at
Right.
so in terms of how we currently use that partially paved lot along Boylston Street, we may need to prohibit the neighborhood from parking there if we need to reserve for teachers during the swing space
During the day.
during the day.
During the day, which would also argue to fix it. I mean, so that it's
yeah,
not.
but we have to figure out, from the town's perspective, is this part of this project, or is it going to be something that gets done in the capital improvement program? I can see the merits of including this, but that's not my choice to make, because I think that would work extremely well, especially, I think, if we pave it and stripe it properly, I think we're gonna get more spaces out of there. People are, when they park there now, they're parking on dirt and grass, and there's not really any delineated spaces up on the Mount Auburn Street end of it, so I think we could probably utilize it better. I think it's worth a conversation, that I will be more than happy to have the conversation with the town manager about, is this something that we need to look at as part of this project?
And we're more than happy to test and lay out what could be accommodated there. So you just let us know how you want to proceed on that at some point.
I'll get back to you before the next meeting.
Okay.
Scott, just one quick question, and maybe this is a minor point, but is there a reason you put one entrance on Chauncey and one entrance on Winthrop for that parking lot?
Just to help the flow and the release a little bit. The prior parking lot had both of them onto this street edge, as you may recall. But it's not, it could be done either way. Certainly could be done either way. it sometimes helps flow a little bit better if you're releasing onto another street and if your release is around the corner and further away from the, like a proposed exit here.
So just, there's the basketball court that's now moved down to the, across from Winthrop Street, but there's that other hard surface court. You show up at the top, just above the parking space. And my question is, what purpose does that serve? Because the other two elementary schools don't have that. They only have they have a playground and a basketball court. This school has playground, basketball court, and this other hard court. I'm not sure how that's used from a school standpoint. And if that were to be eliminated, you actually would have a lot more green space at that area, and that that we show that soccer field, that U6, U8 soccer field, actually could be turned the other way and sort of fill in that lower flat spot.
Sure.
I'm just don't know what, from a programmatic purpose, why this school needs that additional hard court surface where the other two don't.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we have a clear answer to that, but we can certainly reach out to recreation if that would be the appropriate group, or whoever would be the appropriate entity.
Recreation will say you're replacing exactly what they have.
What they have.
Well, that may be true, but, we're actually not replacing everything that was there before, so, I mean.
Just saying what recreation would say.
I know what recreation's gonna say, but, we can't, everything has to be exactly the same because it's always been that way. But I'm just from a operational, standpoint, looking forward, is that really, how is that used? And, if it's primarily used for recess time for the elementary school, why does this elementary school require an additional hard court surface where the other two elementary schools don't? Is there a legitimate educational programmatic reason for doing that?
Vinny, on that point as well, is that if the surface is only primarily used for recess time at the elementary school, is also now separated from the older kid playground in a way that they wouldn't be sending some kids to that hardcore surface for recess and not the other one, whereas I believe that back playground is a preschool playground. Yeah, so I mean, right, so I get your point that if it is just at recess, it's also not going to be in the right spot anymore. But
All right, I just think that's a question.
Fair question. Yep, fair question. We've made a number of adjustments to the Hosmer building floor plan that, again, may seem subtle, but we think they're significant as we're attempting to morph this building and the existing building into something that looks congruent and works together in harmony. So you'll notice, and you may have picked this up in the site plan, but we struggled with creating an entry point, a primary entry point to the new Hosmer building in this corner. It was previously on the plan we showed you 2 weeks ago in this corner. And it presents a challenge because it's right up against the existing one-story preschool. It's kind of tucked into a corner. If we were designing a new building, we would never tuck the primary entry into a corner. And it also made a bit of a circuitous route coming into the building and then turning and having to go in. So we've aligned the primary entry with what is that main commons area so that we can stack administration and then guidance on each side of that entry and have better control, visual control of that entry point. And so that's what you see happening here as we've adjusted the floor plan to engage the existing building better and then to move the entry further away. If you can imagine viewing this building from out in this context, the entries being separated provides a little bit more clear identity to where you're going as well, whether you're going to a preschool classroom or whether you're going to the Hosmer K-5. And then if you look at what that achieves, it also allows us, and whenever we're thinking about passive security for a building, we're always trying to get as much observation on the entry area as possible. So it also allows us to locate a lot of eyes along the front of the building and get administrative at a good control point and be able to, even though we're just in schematic design, set up a number of things that we know will be very successful later on when we get into more detailed design of how that sequence and that control sequence into the building for visitors works.
Is the curvature that you're showing, is that just a reflection of the setback? Because I see the dashed lines inside. I'm just
Yes,
trying-
the setback, let's just go back. The setback is the dash line. And then the curvature represents our thoughts on how we can keep this building from just hitting the other one-story building in an awkward corner and perhaps engage the other building. What we're implying here is that we may be able to take, since this is a primary entry here, if we take this facade and we curve it towards that existing building, and then we carry some element, maybe even across the roof, whether that's sculptural or becomes some other implied element, and then continue that as part of the entry sequence into the existing preschool classroom area, then it will help us tie. We were really struggling with the other footprint on what this building looks like when it sort of runs into the existing building. And if we can tie something that is a two-story element, perhaps a colonnade starting here and then continuing with the facade of this building, and let the one-story building just sort of punch through it on the lower level, we feel like it'll look more like the entire building belongs there and there's some connectivity between the two.
I think I sent an email to you once a while back about the current new entrance, the current entrance, which shows up there, the main entrance we have on both sides. So what is you have the doors on both sides, which look basically the way they are now, correct?
Right.
And what is on the outside of that? What right now? Whether there's an elevator there, so you're keeping that elevator
Right here, yes.
There's a second floor that goes across that. I see.
Yeah, this is a piece that we really have to maintain, unless we want to demolish all of it and completely reconstruct something there. So it would be our goal to continue exploring the possibility of eliminating this as an entry point and making that, the primary entry point, even if you're coming into the preschool.
That would certainly be an option.
And then this
But you're
is
trying to keep the elevator. That's part of it.
Right. And then this acts as a really super nice community vestibule, community entry when we think about the gym and the dining and the activities that may be occurring after hours. So this is a necessity. And then it feels like, and we could go either way, it's a minor adjustment to the floor plan of it. It feels like we may eventually want to decide that even if you're coming into the preschool, you come in through this direction.
The other thought would be whether, I don't know exactly what the new entrance is going to look like, but whether there wants to be, some kind of architectural compatibility between the new entrance and remodeling the old one. Rather than leaving it like the doors that it is right now, but giving it a different image.
Right. Absolutely. We have to take the combination of our aesthetic here and the existing aesthetic and the way that we're playing with solids and voids and transparency meaning glass, and make all of this look like it belongs together. It's an achievable, but it is a significant challenge.
Back from extended day 2 on the layout, or has that happened yet? Okay.
talk about the spaces, and then also talk about where their office will be located for that time of day.
Yeah, I'm mainly thinking about, now that I can speak from experience, the access to that, because I know those doors are the main access for after school. And so just thinking about having, depending on what we do with that, having people enter the main entry, because it's a pretty convoluted route getting from the preschool area to the entry lobby. So just kind of thinking about how that circulation would work.
I'm just looking, it seems like you've put like the extended day office right across from the admin conference room.
We have, but in fairness to the Hosmer, because we sort of did a reset on the Hosmer right as we were rolling into summer, and we haven't wanted to harass Bob and the administration there too much during the summer. And he's been very cooperative and certainly generous with his time. But rolling into September, we want to get more detail on a number of things at the Hosmer as we make adjustments.
That just came up just with the convoluted route from one side to the other. That's probably going to be an issue, so.
Scott,
Yes, sorry.
there's a ramp that goes up to the auditorium, but I see stairs there. Are we removing that ramp?
Yes. Yeah, we think that in order to make best use of this entire area, the ramp that you're referring to sits inside a semicircular curve here and then turns back. And the ramp occupies a giant piece of real estate in a very critical area. And so by demolishing that ramp and utilizing this as a custodial / mechanical receiving area, because that's where all of that takes place now, we can take advantage of that area, and it allows us on the upper floor then to have more real estate to create music ensemble and the music area. And so we are proposing demolition right in the area of that ramp.
So then the elevator is the only ADA capability to the whole second floor of the whole building, correct?
That is correct. For the existing building, I mean, certainly we have a new elevator
Okay.
in the new building.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
But if the community is just using it and the rest of the school is knocked off, then it would only be that only elevator.
That is correct.
Community was gonna be using the auditorium.
Right. And they would come in that vestibule, presumably, go up that elevator, and go across. On the second, I just want to point out on the second floor level, as part of this adjustment, and I apologize, my computer's gotten to the point where I can't even touch my mouse pad without it jumping to the next slide, but as part of the development, the media center was always going to occupy the second floor zone in a convenient location between the first floor and the second floor. But now, with the adjustments in the floor plan, by pulling this wall out and following that curve, it also buys us more real estate for the media center. So the maker space had previously been displaced to another area of the building, but now we can have what is a key adjacency between a maker space and the media center, get some two-story volume. It also allows us to do this area as less than a three-story volume, so pull the scale of the building down towards the street a little bit. So you can see here, this represents the three-story area. And what I was referring to earlier when we were talking about an identifiable entry here for the new K-5 Hosmer and the identifiable entry here for the preschool, and doing something with regard to this wall sort of moving towards the existing building, and that at some point that one-story piece has to project out of that two-story piece. But if we can continue some kind of connecting element, even if it just becomes sculptural, if it became a series of flagpoles with banners on them or something distinguishing the school that just continued that line over to the other entry and helped us tie everything together. We're currently exploring options for how we might be able to do that, and let the entry here be very clear and the entry here be very clear and distinct. And then one of the things that we're doing with the massing of the existing building, and we intentionally took all aesthetics off of these just to talk about massing, but we want to be conscious. We will never be the Brigham House building, and we're going to be lower, more horizontal. We're going to be at a different scale. But there are subtle things we can do to make sure we're at least in harmony. And so we're already talking, some of the movements of the floor plan that you see are starting to give us an opportunity to break down the scale of this building. And you can see we sort of got this centralized middle where we got teacher collaboration and some of those spaces going on. And then we've got the stairs that are pulled back and can become very transparent in these areas. And then we've got the ends of the building that can take on a slightly different aesthetic as we go around the corners. And this is all part of trying to be in harmony with the Brigham House that is a different aesthetic, but does some very similar things in the way it's trying to break down its scale, give the building a base, create an anchor on each corner. And so we will do those same things, although our aesthetic will be different, we'll do those same things in massing. And it's one of the ways that you remain in harmony when you have two different buildings with two different aesthetics, but still sort of respecting one another. So we're working on those aesthetics now, have been for a while, actually.
I want to open it up. Are you all set?
Yes.
I want to open it up to the public. Questions, comments? Please come up to the podium and tell us who you are, for those that may not know.
Anne Marie Clunan, Winthrop Street property owner. In reviewing the plans, where's Scott? Has there been a plan and the true proposal for the preschool that has been presented in regards to the space? And what I mean by that is the proposed preschool expansion and relocation to the Hosmer and the impact on this platform and the cost analysis. Has that been shared or published anywhere in consideration? Do we have that?
No, this was taken up at a school committee meeting several months, John. When was it?
In the spring, yeah. So I mean, one of the issues that the school committee grappled with, even before the building committee was created, or was in the process of being created, the building committee was looking at the configuration of the preschools and the pre-K programs at the school, throughout the district in the three elementaries. And the recommendation from the administration was to try to consolidate that into one space. And there was a lot of arguments of why the benefits for that. And so the school committee made that recommendation that we move forward with that in that direction. So that was kind of one of the opening discussions that came, at about, and Scott was involved with that as well. But that was one of the discussions we had early on.
So according to state regulations, we don't have to offer and expand our preschool program. And so the funding and the factors for this expansion, how were those played into that decision?
Well, the expansion is fairly, it's actually just capturing projected growth of what we have now. That's what we're looking at here. We're not arguing for a major change in kind of our what we're providing in terms of services. It's just projecting growth forward for the preschool.
Right, but
Correct?
the preschool and the pre-K expansion, again, those are, a majority of the expansion is related to tuition-based services, not K through 5 services that are state-funded and true elementary components.
So if I could just speak, the preschool is mandated for our students with special needs. So it is something that we are absolutely obligated to provide for our students in Watertown, beginning at ages 2.9 and up. The other thing with that is that even though we say that you have to have preschool for our students with special needs, it also is required to have students that are typically developing. So although they're tuition based, it is part of the program to be an integrated preschool, which is what our philosophical approach is to preschool. So that's why you have both students with special needs as well as typically developing students. And then the other piece of that is preschool includes pre-K. Pre-K is something that Watertown has embraced for almost 2 decades at this point in time. And as I pointed out before, with pre-K, we have turned away 2 classrooms full of students this year in terms of wait lists to be in our pre-K program. And the benefits of starting in pre-K, moving into school, are just, it's very important for our students to have that foundational experience in our schools. And it is something that Watertown has embraced. And I don't, whether, expansion is something that is something to be discussed. I would say that in Watertown, we have the demand for that, and I think that we are doing a disservice by not expanding based upon the families that want to be in our pre-K program.
So do we have the breakdown of numbers of how many of the children that are currently in the programs are the special needs that we are required to offer services for versus the tuition? Because I haven't seen that in any of the documentation.
I do believe it was in the report that was provided in January of last year.
The report hasn't been produced, just for the record.
It's
I don't have it. I've asked for it twice already. And that report, we have numbers from the presentations, but the actual report.
If you've asked this committee for it, this committee doesn't have it.
But we did direct you to the website.
It's not on the
where
website.
You can go to the website for the schools.
Yes.
It's not on the website, and we had that conversation. So I will follow back up again because the report's not available with those broken down numbers. But in regards to the funding, and is that so the funding for the preschool and the decision to fund and do this expansion on the Hosmer property, where in the funding is that coming out of? Because the state doesn't pay for a significant portion of this expansion component. So how is that the breakdown of what's coming out of the taxpayer funded of this project? Or will be projected into a different project for the high school? Where's the breakdown for those numbers for this? Because this is a significant cost factor and a significant portion of the growth within the Hosmer footprint, and all of the other factors with what we're trying to change with the O'Connell Park will have an impact with that. So do we have that? I mean, the school administration made the decision, but I'm trying to understand how it came up with the cost and what the taxpayer out-of-pocket is and how that fits into elementary improvement.
What costs are you talking about? The cost to do the renovation?
Right.
We haven't gotten to all that yet. We're
Right, but
still-
is there a
still
plan?
working on that. This is an evolving, the costs are going to be evolving through schematic design. The next phase, when we get to it, will be more detailed with project costs. Everything we're doing to these schools right now is coming out of the taxpayers, all taxpayer-funded dollars.
Okay, so that was the
Can-
opening.
Can I add to that? Just because, so first of all, the idea that the money that in the space being used at Hosmer for this preschool, if it wasn't at Hosmer, all of those spaces would also be added to the current plans at the other elementary schools, because the only change is that the preschool, integrated special ed preschool in Phillips, and the 2 other pre-K classrooms that currently exist, one at Lowell and one at Cuniff, would be consolidated into that space. And so there's a lot of misconceptions that the town is creating this giant preschool space, and what they're doing is consolidating that space as part of the renovation. And all of those spaces would end up existing at different schools otherwise. And we had this really great presentation about the really important educational reasons why they should be together. And so it's not that it's a new space being made at Hosmer, it's because it's not going to be made at other places. And second of all, with the MSBA and the high school project, which is state grant funded because we were in that program, the state will not pay 48% of that preschool cost to be built at the high school, because you could only maximum justify that as a high school program up to maybe 2 classrooms, because high school students might participate. And then the other 11 that we need to support our pre-K students that we are, for the most part, currently supporting right now, we would be paying for out of pocket, and it would not be covered by state money. And so the idea that the state would be covering 48% of our preschool is actually not true, if it were to go on the high school site.
I want to let somebody else have a turn now, please.
Okay.
You can get up again, but I want to let you, you can't, you
But the
can't.
first question has there been a plan, a schematic plan, that doesn't include the expansion for the preschool at the Hosmer location? That was the first
No,
question.
we're looking at this strictly as, like Lindsay pointed out, these spaces would be paid for in other schools. We chose as a school committee to consolidate this into one building.
Okay.
Anyone in the general public now want to make a comment? Lisa?
Thank you. My name's Lisa Feltner. Excuse me, I haven't made all the meetings, and I'm very excited about these plans. I just had a couple of questions or plugs, if you will, as a musician. I was curious, for just example, the Cunniffe is right next to the kitchen, but I didn't see any doors through there, and I didn't know. I guess I'd put a plug in general for access to being able to, whether it's a school or the community at large, using performance spaces to be able to hold receptions and have access to sinks or foods. And in talking about Hosmer getting rid of the ramp, I think you said maybe there'd still be an elevator there. I can tell you that for loading in purposes, we use the ramp a lot. And I'm not saying don't get rid of lamp, but I just say whether it's schools for larger instruments or keyboards or sound equipment and whatnot, thinking of flow for access. And I'm wondering, I'm sure you're not at this stage, but thinking about acoustics, we have very few good acoustics for live music performances in Watertown. And so I'm hopeful that these new spaces, thinking beyond beautiful new spaces, that acoustics will be, thought out. And then I was just thinking about that, extra playground at Hosmer. I was thinking along the same lines. I know that separating ages and with the preschool center being looked at being there, I could see why you would have that extra space. Thank you.
What else? Anne Marie, you're welcome to come back up now. Oh, Maureen. Please identify yourself.
Foley, and this is all towards you, Scott. Since the preschool is one floor and it's a large space, why can't, and the rest of the school is going to be 2 or 3 floors, why can't you build classrooms on top of the first level? Because it seems like a waste of space that you're adding floors and that's a viable space you can use for preschool. Not that I'm a big fan of the preschool being there, but if we're gonna have to do it, do you know what I'm saying? Secondly, or regular classrooms, why does the courtyard have to be even larger than the cafeteria? It's a huge space, it seems. Do you
What's
wanna
that, Scott?
it? I'm gonna stand here with you.
I don't want to crowd. I don't want to crowd. I don't want to steal your thunder.
I'm not,
The,
I'm just curious.
I just want to get the floor plan up as we talk about those, so we can. The area that's being referred to is the current preschool area right here, which is on one. It's becomes 2 stories right here, but it's only a 1-story building for the outline that you see right here. So the question, as I understand it, is why wouldn't we just make this a 2-story building? And the reason is just simply economy. This building, this 1-story building, was never designed to take a second floor. So the columns structurally won't take a second floor. The roof deck was only made to take a roof load, not a floor load. So the roof that's on it would have to be removed. the columns would have to be removed and replaced, and the footings and foundations that hold up those columns were never intended to take 2 stories. So ultimately, if we wanted to do 2 stories in this area, it could be done, but it would involve demolishing this entire section all the way to the ground and sort of rebuilding and excavating and starting over to get it to be 2 stories. So for the sake of economy, we've left it as 1 story. And then with regard to the courtyard, it's really just about being able to introduce natural light into the 3 stories of classrooms we have right here. If we start to make this too small, the sun angle as it passes south, keep in mind south is over here, will ultimately, if we close this addition and get it too close to the existing building, the result will be all the classrooms we have on this 3-floor area, and even the natural lighting coming into the student dining area would be cut off. So we're trying to leave enough room there that we get adequate natural light into that area. It's not so much about the courtyard space as it is trying to create and make sure we don't landlock all of the, we got a significant number of classrooms there, that we don't tighten that up too much.
Thank you.
Else? Anne Marie? Anyone else? Anyone from the committee? Scott, do you have anything else? Next item on the agenda is the community outreach group. There's a doodle out for them to schedule their first meeting, but that will be happening shortly. High school update?
Nothing to update this evening.
The next school building committee meeting will be September 26th, back in the council chamber. The ones after that will be on October 3rd and October 17th, also in the council chamber. At the next meeting, we will be discussing further reviews on the building as we just got. Building interiors and finishes and sustainability review. Those are what's on our agenda for the next, starting to get into some details. Subsequent to that, we need to, at some point, the committee needs to say, at some point, these are the desire, this is the way we want to go. And then we have to go out to each individual neighborhood, each in school, and schedule a meeting, whether it be with a full building committee, whether it be a portion thereof, but that's got to happen, and those will be noticed in more ways than one, including, you know, if we have to mail a postcard to notify the neighbors of these meetings. So we need to, at some point, once we go through another presentation, if the committee is comfortable with this direction, I'm not saying these are the exact final designs, but if we're looking at potentially this is what we want to do, that we need to tell the people that live in those neighborhoods. So, Lindsay?
At one point, I thought I remember saying the next meeting was going to be about a stormwater report or something. Is that being moved?
I think is that part of sustainability, Shane?
Andrew talked a little bit about the stormwater management and the specific town regulations in his presentation at the last building committee meeting.
We didn't get really deep into that.
Oh, okay, all right. Thanks.
Sustainability is going to be things that we're going to have to make decisions on, you know, with choices with lead and so forth. John?
Just a question. So what's the kind of approximate time frame for the schematic design phase? What do you?
So we're just we're hoping, you know, by the third, there'll be some sort of decision that design is progressed to a schematic that you're happy with and you can send to the estimators. Once the estimators get it, it's probably a 3 to 4 week process, and we'll do 2 estimates. We'll come together with the 2 estimates, reconcile them, and maybe some bioengineering or biomanagement we have to do. And we're looking at, you know, get the go ahead,
those were kind of my thoughts, because I don't think the general public, while it's tax dollars, I understand, I think the concept of what we're doing in the neighborhood is more important than, we're gonna continue to refine costs, and we're gonna have to continue to discuss costs and make choices that are gonna impact the costs. But I do think that, you know, look at the additions we're doing to the Lowell, the neighborhood needs to see that. Isn't that what they have the wedding day? Going through all that now,
Similar.
so I'm,
Similar to that. So yeah, we could just call it a first look just to get initial feedback, but I just would hate to just sit.
right, no,
Well, I don't think we would sit, so we would have another building committee meeting while they're.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're suggesting that maybe we start looking at furniture and
Yeah,
equipment
yeah.
at that,
Yeah.
which won't be in the construction cost estimate, but that's something we're gonna.
It also doesn't impact layout, so I'm just trying to think, you know what I mean?
I think without attaching the numbers to the schematic design as well, you get a different kind of feedback from the public. And so if you're talking about massing and layout and design of the site and how that might impact your neighborhood or the schools, the educational programming, that's a different kind of feedback than also at the same time attaching a possible estimated cost to it. And so I kind of agree with Kelly that it would be a productive time to get a different kind of feedback from the public about the projects.
just don't wanna get too far into it and have one whole neighborhood say, this is awful, we can't take this, because, you know, then we don't wanna get them down the road so far that we can't turn back, because we may have to relook, given what the neighbors say.
It looks like we've been sitting on the same plans for a couple of weeks now without, not a lot of pushback. Maybe we're at that point after next week so that we're getting in front of the community, because we've heard the concerns about the communication. We're getting in front of the community, or, you know, sooner rather than later, so.
Else have any other comments at this point? Anyone else have any general comments from the public? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor? Thank you.